Hi, I'm Lenny Beatty.
Hi, I'm Haven Kohler.
I am Marc Venturini.
I'm Chaz DeMarco.
And I'm Jonny. Not.
And our problem that we're focusing on is student housing at Chapman and the fact that Chapman is taking advantage of its students in the form of this 3-year student housing mandate. So now students are required to spend their first 3 years in student housing and seemingly getting nothing, no benefits in return. For the students, this rule is only bearing us deeper into debt. It is not allowing us to make real world decisions for ourselves, and it's forcing us to overpay for dorm rooms, whereas it would realistically be cheaper just to buy, or not to buy, to rent an apartment or even a house with multiple people in it. And this mandate is seemingly only benefiting the school because it's boosting their profits because they have thousands more kids paying that extra year of rent, even though we're already paying, what, $60,000 yearly for tuition. So it just kind of, from our perspective, it raises the question if Chapman really cares about the students or if it's just all about money. Um, and so Chapman also argues that the student housing will help build a community within our school, but to be real, like that's not going to happen. You're not going to build a community by forcing students to pay $1,600 a month for an entire year. Like a community is naturally going to be built through meeting people in classes, clubs, sports, school events, things of that sort. And so, yeah, we'll be discussing the 3-year student housing mandate.
As a current student living in my second year of on campus housing, I can say that on campus housing is not optimal for all students, considering they've just increased the living requirement to 3 years. If it can oftentimes make it harder, like Lenny said, to time manage and stay on top of financial obligations with Chapman. For personal experience, I currently live in Chapman Grand, which is one of the apartment complexes in Anaheim, which is 15 minutes away from campus. And 15 minutes may not seem like a lot, but it becomes inconvenient when you have to drive to and from school 2 to 3 times a day. If you have a morning class and a night class, adding on to that on a regular basis, I have to leave Grand 30 to 40 minutes early to get to my class on time and score a parking spot on campus, considering there's pretty big shortage of parking on campus. And I am lucky enough to have a car, but for students without a car, they are also required to rely on the Chapman shuttle, which is not always reliable. And other than proximity, the 3-year housing requirement also increases financial burden. So for my current situation, I'm paying $1,600 a month, and that's to share a room. And for a single, it would be $1,800 a month. And comparing that to the average rent for a single room, if you were to rent in just Old Town Orange, it would be hundreds of dollars less. So, with increasing tuition at the same time, the last thing students need to do is the burden of paying Chapman housing for 3 years. Although you may argue you could choose a cheaper option, such as Davis Apartments or Panther Village, these are also not guaranteed, and they're also not as modern as other buildings that may be more favorable. Similarly, you could argue that students could choose the K, but because it's so close to school, this is also the apartment that usually fills up the quickest. And because there is that requirement, students can't just try to find a different option. They are required to look at a different option of actual Chapman housing. With no flexibility consider of other options, it leaves students stuck to have 3 out of the 4 years of their college experience in Chapman housing.
So to effectively solve the issue of this 3-year campus living requirement through the satisfaction step, we're going to propose a three clear actionable solutions that are designed to empower the students rather than, enforce them into this living requirement. So first, Chapman should adjust the pricing structure to make on-campus housing cheaper. This is an affordable and voluntary housing solution. So this change makes campus housing financially attractive and voluntary rather than mandatory. And they can find these prices based off local market averages. Average costs right now are 14 to $1,800 for on campus and around 1,200 for off campus. So large savings. And similar strategies at UC Irvine resulted in increased voluntary occupancy and higher overall student satisfaction. And that's from the UC Irvine housing page. And then solution two would be an independent living solutions. So Chapman should implement, a structured independent living program, and this would provide resources and workshops teaching students the essential life skills, to go off and find their own housing solutions. And then the third option would be, Chapman offering a more flexible approach, maybe only one semester or monthly options. And this approach would address, diverse student needs, especially internships, study abroad, or any, an array of things. And so ultimately, by adopting these solutions, Chapman University can effectively respond to students' needs and foster an environment that prioritizes affordability, flexibility, and independence, ultimately strengthening the campus community. And these three solutions, collectively offer significant benefits, decreased financial burden, enhanced student independence, and increased housing satisfaction, and in improving overall student well-being. Thank you.
Moving on, talk about like the visualization of this and if Chapman were to change the 3-year living requirement. So imagine you're a junior, it's your junior year at Chapman, and instead of being forced to live in a dorm, you actually have housing options. Some students may live closer to internships in Irvine or LA, and others might move into fraternity or sorority houses, which would build stronger communities. Some can rent off campus with friends, and this would save money and help gain real independence. Now picture this, you're living in a chapter house and helping lead events, or maybe you've got an internship and a short commute, or you're learning how to budget and manage your own place. Students feel trusted, empowered, and more connected to live beyond campus. Giving students that flexibility has major upsides. First of all, it supports Chapman's mission of personalized education. Not every student has the same needs. So housing shouldn't be like one size fit all. It should be more flexible. Secondly, it strengthens Greek life. Right now, many chapter houses, and just fraternity houses and sorority houses, they sit half empty because kids can't get out of housing. And letting juniors and sophomores live in them brings back tradition, leadership, and more student engagement. Third, it prepares us for real life. Living off campus builds real world skills like responsibility, time management, and budgeting, and it makes internships more accessible for students. Um, Research supports this too. Students with housing autonomy report better satisfaction and mental health, according to the American Council on Education. And strict housing rules reduce Greek engagement. Chapman's own mission talks about student-centered experiences and preparing us for ethical and productive lives. And this 3-year living requirement just completely goes against that. Right now, juniors are like stuck in the dorms, but with change, we can get a choice, we can build stronger communities, and we can get real world prep. So housing flexibility helps Chapman students thrive socially, academically, and professionally, and that's a little visual of why we should change the 3-year living requirement.
All right. So now that you've heard about the issue, the solution, and the vision for better housing policy at Chapman, it's time to talk about what matters most, action. Chapman's 3-year housing requirement forces students to live in expensive, inconvenient locations like Chapman Grand and Panther Village, places that can cost up to $1,600 a month, are far from campus and make commuting a daily struggle. This policy takes away from your freedom to choose more affordable, closer housing options, even when they're better for your financial, academic, and social life. Uh, that's why we created this petition, not just to voice frustration, but to demand change. We're calling on Chapman to revert to a 2-year housing requirement, make third-year housing optional, increase transparency and flexibility in the housing process. Signing this petition is your way to take real action. It will be submitted directly to Chapman's housing office and shared with student government, but it only matters if we have support behind it. So if you believe in student freedom, financial fairness, and housing choice, take 30 seconds to sign your name, add your voice to something different that can actually make a difference. Chapman students deserve options, they deserve respect, and they deserve a say. So let's take back our choice. Sign the petition.